I never aspired to be in political office, so it's just really strange that I am.
How did you get there?
When I opened my business, the city wanted to charge me $5,000 to move my sign 2 feet, and I thought that that was outrageous. And at the same time, we were also building MidTown, and of course, they said, Hillary, you're going to be the one to go speak at city council and tell them that we need lighting and sidewalks down here. And I was naive enough to say, great, I'll go do it. I'll never forget, I got up at the dais and I looked at Mayor Schieve, and I thought I was going to have a meltdown. They looked at me like I was sort of crazy. They didn't think that MidTown was even going to be a thing. and it is.
Greetings, everyone. This is Eric Henry Anderson, and welcome to another episode of Conversations for Convergence, a curious podcast exploring myriad topics, including music and the arts, health and wellness, culture, high performance, and many others. Today's guest is Reno Mayor Hillary Schieve. Hillary Schieve is an American businesswoman and politician hailing from Reno, Nevada. She served as mayor of Reno since 2014 and is not affiliated with a political party. She's been the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which she's held since 2023, and is the first independent politician to serve as its president. In 2017, Schieve was named by Politico as one of the 11 most interesting mayors in America, citing her work to revitalize the MidTown District of Reno and continued efforts to promote affordable housing, mental health services, and the fight against homelessness. Mayor Schieve and I got into all sorts of topics today, including how she got into politics, her passion for the arts, the housing crisis in Reno, the complexity of the homelessness issue, her passion for mental health and her personal relationship to it, the potential for novel approaches to mental health treatment, including psychedelics, why she identifies as non-partisan, her work as president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, our mutual admiration for Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, the upcoming presidential election, the Reno Heartbeat song and video project from 2020, and a few other topics. And regardless of where you might fall on the political spectrum, I hope you get a sense of Mayor Schieve as a person today through this conversation. She certainly was a joy to talk to. And here it is, Reno Mayor Hillary Schieve. I'm here with Mayor Hillary Schieve. Thanks for joining me, Mayor.
Thanks for allowing me to join you.
This is quite the amazing office. I've never been up here.
Oh.
Quite the view of Reno.
You have not been up here? Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about my office. Everything in here is recycled. Okay. And obviously you can tell by what's behind you, I love ping pong.
I was going to ask, does that get used regularly?
I always joke that I play for votes.
Okay.
And then, really I don't. And then I also joke that we play beer pong. Okay. Up here on Fridays. But
I've heard that rumor, so that's not true.
Right. And that's a joke, too.
All right.
I should make sure I tell everyone that, because then people are like, what's she doing? Drinking in her office. I have people that sometimes take things too seriously. So I have to
I've seen that before. What do you know?
So I have to clarify that. But no, honestly, I brought it in here because obviously it can be a very stressful job. Mm-hmm. And people, when they walk in, sometimes are not always so happy. And you can say, hey, let's play a game of ping pong. And do you know, by the time they leave here, even if, it's not something that we might agree on. Yeah. But we seem to find commonality, and so I've found it to be a great icebreaker and a way to laugh a little bit and not take yourself too seriously. Yeah.
That's amazing. As a matter of fact, it's not exactly where I was going to start, but because you sort of led us there, just in this political climate, social climate that we live in, there's so much tension, right? And I've found as a musician, and just what you were saying about the ping pong table here made me think of this, is that if you can get people in an environment where there's a sense of community and camaraderie, and you can start with where you actually agree and your shared humanity, then all of a sudden, everything else is easier.
Isn't it so true? But you're in the music business, so like everything you do seems like it can bring people together. I'm just curious, do you see some of that like in what you do? And now I would think somewhat, because you have to use social media, right, to sort of promote yourself and do those things. Do you sort of see the same thing or no?
Yeah, I would say that I see more of it than I wish I did. My favorite artists, I like all sorts of music, but a lot of my favorite artists are, they're Billy Joel and they're Bruce Springsteen and
everyone loves them.
They're artists that often talk about important things. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's always has to be this heavy, intense subject matter. Sometimes it's just happy-go-lucky, let's have a great time. But I think there is a place for the arts to get into the more difficult conversations that need to be had. But when you do it through the arts, you often have the opportunity to, it's not that you're tricking people, but you're sort of disarming everybody into feeling like, let's start with with something we love, which is the song. And then from that disposition, we can actually get into the things we disagree about in a way that's much more civil. And ultimately, a lot of times you do find agreement. But when you don't, it's like, I don't hate you, and that's okay.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So
yeah.
I do actually see that in music, but sometimes music is just about providing a release and
But you
an
never get like
for
people that respond on your social media like, you suck. Because you're like one of the most talented musicians I know. And I'm a huge fan. So like full disclosure, I'm a big fan of yours. I was so excited to work with you on the City Song Project. But I'm just curious. Like I have had to really put myself on a content diet. I don't do a lot of social media anymore at all.
Can you turn the mic slightly more?
Can you hear me?
There we can. Yeah, no, I got plenty of things.
So I have to be really careful about what I consume.
Yeah.
And so I just know in the political realm how nasty and negative it is. And these are people I've never met in my life that I don't know at all. And that's not just with me. I see it with other politicians, regardless. Like if you're a politician, you are you're corrupt, you're in the pockets, you're this, that, and the other. So I'm just curious, in your profession, do you sort of see the same thing or?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't see it as much as you do.
I guess,
Definitely not as much as
true.
you do. And I think most musicians don't, unless in certain situations they might take a stand on an issue, which I always have sort of a mixed feeling on. I definitely think there's a place to take a stand, but I also think as a musician or even as an institution, you're seeing it happen now at universities too, where some major event happens, but the reality is that in a world that's so connected, some major event happens all the time. And is it really the responsibility of an artist or even every institution to say every single time something happens, this is how we feel about it? I would say not necessarily. I think your reputation sort of precedes you, but not as much as you. And I see that, and
I guess it's just politics. But then again, look, I was looking at something the other day, and it was about Taylor Swift. I think she is so strong and shows a lot of strength and a lot of optimism, especially for sort of the younger generation. But I see sort of the things that she has to put up with. And I just know that's got to be so overwhelming, especially, for your mental health. And so I just wonder, with artists, you guys get it too. I just maybe not, the magnitude that politicians get it, but I just kind of wondered, do you guys
Well, Taylor Swift probably gets it more than you. And you get it more than me.
Way more.
But I'm sure she has to be on an information reduced diet too, because the phenomenon with social media is now everything goes out in real time. And
crazy.
With a level of anonymity, people can really hate you, which I'm sure you experience all the time. And a lot of times, not even specifically in your personal defense, although I've been that person certainly at times, but it's more like, man, it's not to say that our public officials shouldn't be held accountable. They should, but at the same time, it's like, let me see what you would do with that problem. Right. And a lot of times there's just information that necessarily we don't have. And so I like to give benefit of the doubt to a politician and go, okay, in the grand scheme of who this person is, do I think that they're likely to be doing the best that they can? Sometimes we don't know what's happening.
Well, and that's true. I think there's a saying, first seek to understand, then seek to be understood, right? There's so much of that, especially in politics, because right away people are so easy to judge you. So I think you're totally right about that. But I always say, because I'm a nonpartisan, I don't identify with a party, and I always say that there are things that I really believe that we can agree on, all of us. It doesn't matter who we are, and well, you better know your audience, because one time as I was speaking at UNR, and I said, well, we can all agree that beer tastes good. Well, what I didn't realize, it was during the summer, and it actually was a group of kids that, well, I should call them kids, but kids that are, freshmen in high school.
No.
Well, actually, freshmen to seniors in high school. So
Like
that's when you learn.
headline, Mayor Schieve tells the high school.
Promotes, high school drinking. But no, so like that is an instance like know your audience. I should have used we all can agree that ice cream tastes good.
Sure.
Right? Now we're not going to agree on everything, and that's what's so great about our country and being different and having unique ideas and just differences. We don't want to look all the same. I don't think that that's healthy either.
Right.
But I think individuality is good. Now, there are politicians that I actually respect and admire, but I certainly don't agree with everything that they say. It's one of the reasons why I have a hard time with parties, because I don't believe you support bad policy because your party tells you to, right? And so I just think that there should be, I think to your point, it's not always black and white or what it seems.
Usually it's not, in fact.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then there's a whole other side to it too, because then the media plays a role in a headline. And what I know is that most people will read a headline, but they won't read the story.
Sure.
So there's a lot of that too.
And unfortunately, the incentive is it's clickbait, right? So
for sure.
The incentive, unfortunately, and this is something we could certainly talk about, but one of the problems that I see in kind of the modern information landscape is the incentive is actually not to be truthful. You may end up being truthful, but the incentive is just to be salacious. And so it's hard to even point a finger specifically at a journalist. You might not agree with me on that, especially because the finger will get pointed at you often. But I think the system as a whole needs some sort of overhaul, because I think the ones who have the most integrity aren't actually getting the most attention, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, remember, I think in today's world, because of technology, there are a lot of people that say they are journalists, and they're not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
right?
Totally.
And then you start to see other news that's out there, and they could be deep fakes and all those things. And so I think eventually you will see, through blockchain technology and smart contracts, we'll be able to identify those things that are real and that are not real.
I certainly hope you're onto something with that.
I do. I think that's the only way we're going to sort of be able to identify sort of the news, I guess the reputability of news.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of, I think we absolutely will get there. But so that makes it more difficult too, because you also what's the source and all those things. Anyway, well, we're getting kind of probably down the road, and I'm sorry, but our conversation just started morphed into news and fake news and
and actually it's perfectly leading us into a couple of questions. One that I had for you about being identified as non-partisan. I was going to ask you about that. One, I love that. I assume you must have strong political convictions, you have your feelings, but so is that because you consider yourself more politically moderate, or is it because you want to actually have the freedom, I guess, as you stated before, to not be sort of obliged to bad policy because of the system? Or is it something else?
Probably a couple things. I grew up in a household where my mother was a D and my dad was an R. So I think that probably helped, because I could see both sides.
The good and the bad, probably, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I could see their arguments. I definitely think it's great because you're not beholden to anyone. And also, I never aspired to, be in political office. So it's just really strange that I am in political office.
How did you get there? That was another question.
It came from when I opened my business. The city wanted to charge me $5,000 to move my sign 2 feet. And I thought that was outrageous. And I was like, this is really crazy. Why, small business, they need sort of champions to, help small businesses. And also small business, a lot of people don't realize this, but they're the largest job creators in the country.
Really? I didn't know
Most
that.
people think it's Fortune 500 companies. It's not. It's small businesses. And And so I just didn't have a great experience with the city. And at the same time, we were also building Midtown. And when we first started Midtown, there were 4 of us. And of course, they said, Hillary, you're going to be the one to go speak at city council and tell them that we need lighting and sidewalks down here. And I was naive enough to say, great, I'll go do it. And I'll never forget, I got up at the dais and I looked at Mayor Schieve and I thought I was going to have a meltdown, because I
Just
never.
nerves, you mean?
Well, yeah, because you're so passionate about something. And I think they looked at me like I was sort of crazy. They didn't think that Midtown was even going to be a thing. and
it
so,
is.
And it is. And here
well
we
done
are.
to your
See?
contribution in that vision.
So it was sort of out of that love. And then also I think being born and raised here, growing up here, there wasn't a lot to do, because it was so predominantly gaming. And I wanted to see a city that was vibrant and artistic and inclusive, all the things that I think make cities great, but also, keep young people wanting to stay here. I mean, you stayed here from going to school here.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I certainly fell in love with the city. There's no doubt about it. I also just found some incredible friends and had musical opportunities that actually, I guess, kind of kept me here.
Yeah.
I love it here. And by the way, not just trying to, sing your praises here publicly, but absolutely congratulations on the part that you played in really bringing Reno back. Because honestly, even since I've been here, which is 15 years, it's changed a lot. And I would say 90% for the better. So thank you for that.
Oh, no,
and
you are so kind. It's all of us together, actually.
Well,
I could never do one thing, but I feel like you go out there and you root others on because you know that either they're fighting a hard battle or they're wanting to do something different that can be tough to embrace. Like we were just talking about this earlier. I had another film crew in here earlier today, and they were saying the city has gone through so much transformation, and how do you feel about it? It's hard to watch us grow up too, because I remember the days, and I'm going to be dating myself when I say this, but I remember Hash Lane. Now you would never remember that, but that was McCarran at one time.
Okay. And
it was a 2-lane road, and it had all these massive trees on, down it, and it was just such a cool street. So I remember back in those days, but it's changed so much. But I also think you have to foster people out there that are doing great things, creative things, just in every aspect. And so I've been fortunate enough to say, hey, Eric, go do this. Go make us proud. And that's what you do. You go out there and you create music. And you guys are out there sort of also being the ambassadors of our city.
Sure.
So it's not that hard, which is really great. But, cities are also incredibly complex. It's hard to see more traffic.
Yeah.
It's hard to see more growth. That is hard, right?
Yeah.
And I see why people want to move here. We have a great quality of life.
Right.
And we have so many attributes most cities don't have.
Right.
So I feel very, very blessed. But I also think we had a different vision than the last administration, very much of being much more diverse.
Yeah.
And that was one thing. Yes, gaming is still important, but what I saw, actually, to be honest with you, is how detrimental it is to be invested entirely in one sector.
Yeah, for
whenever
sure.
you're
vulnerable too, aren't
yeah,
you?
exactly. Like in the downturn in 2008 when we went through the recession, one of the reasons why we were one of the hardest hit is because we were so predominantly gaming. And that should be only part of the story that you tell, or part of, let's just say, your portfolio, like you would with the stock investment portfolio. You got to diversify if you're going to be able to weather the hard times.
Yeah. Well, and as you stated, gaming is undeniably part of what Reno is, but it's actually only a small part.
Right.
Reno is so many other things. I imagine as mayor, you're probably constantly balancing various challenges, like, for example, the economic value to growth. But that's also going to, frankly, piss off certain people, right? Because they want to hold on to a certain vision. They want cost. Everyone wants cost to be low, right? But there's so many of these agendas that are maybe sometimes in conflict, and you have to balance that stuff. I don't know if you
yeah,
can say
it's
anything about that.
really hard. And no, absolutely. It can be really, really hard because people see, what a great place this is to live, and they move
Can't
here.
blame them.
Well, and it's caused a housing crisis.
Right.
And that is really hard. And I also think people don't realize that it's a supply and demand issue. It's an economics issue.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have enough supply to meet the demand, what do you think is going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Your housing is going to be very, very expensive
Right.
because people can dominate that housing because they can afford to.
Sure.
And those that can't afford it will be left out.
Right.
And then that creates the inequality.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
And so that's what's hard whenever a project might come before the council, where, and honestly, every project that gets denied. Now, listen, you should support good projects because they're good projects. Not every project is a good project. Now, I would say a lot has to happen before it gets to the city, right? In order for us to look at it.
Sure.
So typically there's a lot of checks and balances by the time it gets to the council. But what I'd say is when those projects get denied, that also continues to become a hardship for those that want housing.
Yeah.
Like, especially, we see a lot of pushback. People don't see this about being in this position, but we get a lot of pushback about when we approve affordable housing.
Right.
And I just find that sad, especially because someone out there, we approved their housing, their development.
Yeah.
And that was okay when we approved it for them, but not someone else that's struggling that
Sure.
needs affordable housing.
Yeah.
So I get kind of frustrated with that. And then there's also another side when it comes to development that, people have property rights. They have they have property rights. So if you buy a piece of land and you have all the required zoning and you meet all of that, you can build on that. I can't do anything about that because it's called the taking. So there's a lot of, I think, complexities when it comes to that issue alone that people don't understand that it's tough. It's a tough position to be in because you can obviously identify with both sides in some capacity, but we've got to continue to put housing into the market or we will always have prices that are too exorbitant for people that could afford them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was just, I guess, going to ask you about housing crisis again. Not the most comfortable conversation, but I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss, at least touch on the homelessness issue.
Absolutely.
Is something that's hit Reno. We're seeing it all over the country.
It's all over the world. Yes.
What I know is just fundamentally a very challenging problem. And actually, that can take us right into mental health because that's another thing I know it's near and dear to your heart. But what do you see as ways we can, both as in your position as the mayor and also just as a community, what can we do to actually fix that problem or make it better?
Well, first of all, it's a national crisis because sometimes I think, especially if you don't go and visit other cities, and some people never, leave, and I don't know if they really see. I've just recently been in Los Angeles and New York and Oakland, and really seeing just some incredibly sad situations, but we have the same ones here.
Like
we're
apocalyptic in some of those cities,
right?
I've seen
Yes,
lately. You
exactly.
just can't even believe it's real.
Exactly. And there's a lot of different reasons why that's happening, and so we can't sit there and say, "Hey, this is the reason, the one reason why," because people want to say, "Oh, it's because our wages aren't, keeping up," right? Those kinds of things. Yes. There's a lot of different factors. And it can be, honestly, we see seniors that are on a super tight fixed income that maybe they had to pay for a vet bill, something super unexpected. That could put someone into homelessness. It could be someone who is suffering from severe addiction.
Yeah.
Okay. It could be someone that's suffering from severe schizophrenia, right? That isn't suffering from addiction.
Yeah.
It could be someone that, because of terrible hardship, lost everything they own and put them into homelessness. Yeah. So I get very frustrated when people want to put like a label on it. It's just caused from this.
Like a moral overlay on it. Like they should just do better, or?
Well, yeah, like I hate that, people think that it's caused by one thing only, and then it tends to sort of get discredited why people end up in homelessness.
Meaning it's a much more complicated issue than that. It's not like Mayor Schieve just do this one thing and then the problem
or
will go
like
away.
I'll hear, people, oh, it's all drug addicts. It's we cannot sit there and say one size fits all, right? And that also means we can't sit there and say that for the solutions that we need to be implementing, right? Yeah. So everyone needs to be triaged. And what I mean, by triaged is like figuring out first, how did they get there? We can't help someone if we don't know where they came from. I also believe that. And so, because different solutions are going to work for different people. But if we keep putting them in one box or one shelter, we are never going to be able to get people the help they need.
Right.
And so, and the other thing is, I don't believe in housing first models unless you are someone that can sustain housing, right? Because then you can have long-term success. And housing first models are just basically where you put someone in housing and you're good to go. And you just get them a roof over their head.
Like, it's not that simple, is what you're saying.
Right, because some people will do much better in housing if they have wraparound services. And that could be someone that may be suffering from schizophrenia. Yes, we get them housing, but if they're suffering from schizophrenia, we also need to make sure that they have a caseworker that follows up with them. Are you taking your medications? Those kinds of things, right? And so they can also get the tools that they need to be successful in long-term housing. Because what we've seen for a while, I've watched it, is that we would just start, housing people, and then eventually they couldn't sustain it. So I think you have to look at, okay, who can sustain housing today? Because we know we have it, so let's get that, right? Put them in housing because we know they can be successful in housing. But maybe there's another population over here that might not be because they need more extensive wraparound services, those kinds of things, right?
Right.
We know those models can be very successful. So it's not just one size fits all. There is no perfect pill. It's very, very complex.
Right.
And so we also need to be providing for, certain populations more treatment.
Sure.
More access to treatment. We shouldn't have to have people arrested to get help.
Well, it's not only, at least as I see it, immoral. It's also just a total waste of services.
Oh.
That is not what law enforcement should be doing. They have more specific and not necessarily important, but more things that are native to what their job description is, right?
Well, exactly. And here's what I would say. Like, everyone's noticing it, and we're seeing the numbers grow. Well, there's a reason, because what we're doing isn't working. So we've got to identify, hey, what we're doing isn't working.
Sure.
So we have to change this model.
Yeah.
Right? And so this should be a stark reminder to everyone when everyone wants to point the finger. You're right. You should be frustrated because what the government's been doing isn't working.
Sure.
So we've got to be the first to say we've failed here. And that now it's a lot of work to triage or figure out why, someone is, been put in, situations where it's caused extreme hardship, right? Yeah. So they don't want to do a lot of that work because it's tough. It's tough, right? But now I think if we don't, it's going to be detrimental.
Yeah.
And so that's where I've been saying, look, what we're doing isn't working. Yeah. We've got to start over. So actually, working with programs with the county, like Hopes and CHA, there's a lot of really, really good people in our community doing some amazing work that are really helping. And so we've got to support them. Sure. And by them being able to identify why people are homeless, what do they need? This person might just need, housing. This person might really, truly need to be in treatment. Sure. Someone that needs to be in treatment is not going to be successful in housing.
Yeah, it needs a comprehensive approach, right? It's not that simple.
Exactly. Yeah. So until we start, I guess, peeling back the complexities of what's really going on, we're just spinning our wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that you are passionate about mental health, and obviously that very much impacts what we're talking about right now with homelessness. But more specific to mental health, Why is that something you're so passionate about? Is there any particular set of reasons? And I guess what are some initiatives that you're working on as mayor
Well,
to address
it's
that?
something I never talked about my entire life, but I watched my sister and my brother, struggle with severe mental health issues. And I never talked about it until a couple of years ago, obviously, after I lost my sister and I lost my brother within a few months of each other due to ultimately struggling with their mental health. My sister, though, was, she was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. She should have survived. The survival rate on that is like 85%. It's very high. And unfortunately, she had suffered with depression her whole life. And when she was diagnosed, she became completely paralyzed. The depression got worse because what we didn't understand is some of the medications that you're on for chemotherapy and those things make it worse. And we didn't know that she had stopped going to treatment, and she'd been lying to us about it.
I'm so sorry.
And it was just so hard to find out. I had a friend that worked for the cancer specialist and said, I don't know how to tell you this, but your sister has not been coming to treatment. And she'd been lying to us and saying that she had been getting treatment. And I was just devastated. And so I went over to her house and I said, you're coming to live with me. This isn't okay, not acceptable. We've got to fight this. What I didn't know at that time, and it broke my heart. What I didn't know is the next day I took her to a doctor's appointment and we found out that her breast cancer was stage 4. And it was too late to save her. And so that just absolutely broke my heart. Like, I don't know, it's still hard for me to talk about. And just, I remember her saying to me, Hillary, I would much rather have cancer than depression. And that's
profound.
And it's tough to hear, that's how hard her depression was for her to deal with. And I don't think I realized the magnitude because and that's the other thing, she had chemical depression. And some people, I don't think they understand the magnitude of, mental health and how debilitating it can truly be. And so I learned a lot. Like I said, I grew up with it, but I think I never understood it because I didn't suffer from anxiety or depression or those things. I got lucky. Like, honestly, I say, it was the lotto for me. But for her, she had been living in darkness her whole life. Yeah. And so, but going through that it was so heartbreaking because I took care of her until she died. And it was just a horrible, horrible experience. Nothing you ever want anyone to ever go through. And then, trying to deal with that kind of grief of losing a sibling, because that's a whole other thing. It's one thing to, no one wants to lose loved ones, but, your mother and your father, that's something that we all are going to have to deal with. But your sibling is so different. You're so connected to them in different ways. They're your whole history,
and they're
in
your
life.
Yeah,
it's
exactly. It's not
like
a natural thing, especially not when you're in your
They're your
30s
best
or
friend
40s
whenever
or
your dad's
whatever.
running after you with a belt.
Yeah.
Or the spoon or the spatula, right? They can identify. You're both trying to run for cover, right? Those kinds of things. The memories that you just have in your siblings. And even though we were a dysfunctional family, we were very, very close. But then, it wasn't several weeks later that, we found my brother dead, from what we think was some, I guess, he definitely had suffered from some addiction issues. I just don't know if we knew the magnitude. Yeah. And so that was really hard because you're still grieving and you don't know how to process that, let alone process, another sibling. And so I guess, I'm in this position where I've got to talk about it because with that kind of loss, I went through my own depression.
Yeah.
And grief is a very real thing. But what I realized is when I started to talk about it, people were saying, wow, I can identify with that. And so then I started to think, if your mayor's not talking about mental health, then who is? Because I really believe like that's the number one issue. Because think about it. If you don't have your mental health, what do you have? You don't have your education. You don't have your infrastructure. You can't hold down a job.
It's the lens through which you interact with the entire world, right? Like your sister saying, I'd rather have cancer than be depressed.
Yeah.
That's profound, because the way I interpret that is like if your mental health is significantly off, as you said, nothing matters.
Nothing
Collectively,
matters.
nothing matters either. You're not going to solve
That's what
any
I'm saying.
problems.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So the last 2.5 years, I've been talking about it a lot. I've been talking about it nationally, and I've really encouraged mayors. Right now, I'm the president of the United States Conference of Mayors and working with the Surgeon General on mental health and really talking to mayors. Like, if you're not talking about it, then who's going to be talking about it? You have to show that we're strong enough. Yes. I mean, I hid from it for a long time because I did have a very dysfunctional family. And so I never wanted to talk about it because I never wanted to embarrass them. Yeah. But also I didn't want people to know that I was, living in this dysfunctional household. Right. And especially as mayor, you feel like, well, wait a minute, I can't have faults.
Right.
I've got to be strong. And I can't be human. Yeah. And so I just really feel like now that I've been talking about it, it certainly gave me a weight off my shoulders. Because I think, like I said, I lived with this dark secret for such a long time.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. That sounds like obviously you've been through a lot. That's really intense, but I applaud your courage to speak about it publicly too. I completely agree with you. I think people need to see that leaders are also human beings who deal with the same things we do, and it certainly destigmatizes something like mental health, right? I mean, it is as fundamental to the human condition as any, right? It's not a sign of weakness, and if we can't talk about it,
right,
we can't get there. So,
thank
you, and also I'm just on a personal level very sorry that you went through that, because that's absolutely awful.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things I'm not sure I'll ever recover from. I have such a hole in my heart, and there's nothing worse than like missing someone so much, that like it's a feeling that I can't even explain. I don't even want to explain it because you don't ever want anyone else to ever go through it. Something like that. It's this horrible, like physical ache and sadness, and grief is really weird because it can hit you like at any time. But that's why, I feel compelled that being in this position, I have to do everything I possibly can to make a difference when it comes to mental health. And we have a massive crisis in this country. We treat mental health in our jails. We use our jails as mental health hospitals, and even our ERs. And ERs are where I always say we fix broken bones, not broken brains. Yeah. They don't know how to deal with a mental health crisis. Yeah. And so I've really had to uncover a system that is incredibly broken. And so I'm trying to do my part, obviously locally, to make a difference. And one of the things I'm really proud of, that it's probably the one thing that I'll look back on and say that I'm probably the most proud of, is that for the last 6 years, I've been working on getting a 24/7 urgent behavioral health initiative. And it would be a full-time place that anyone could go at any time that was struggling with their mental health. Because one thing I also learned with my siblings is that oftentimes they were struggling and there was no access to care. Like, what do you do when someone's having a meltdown? There's only two things. You're going to have to call the police. Then you're going to be worried to death about what that outcome might look like.
Because they're not really designed to handle that.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Why are we sending police officers to a health crisis? Yeah. It's crazy to me. And also, police officers don't want to do that either. Yeah. It's not what they signed up for.
Become a police officer for this? Yeah, exactly.
Or take a loved one to an ER or a hospital where they don't treat that.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. And a lot of times, even if you're on a 72-hour hold, we know for sure that they're let go hours later.
Yeah.
And they're oftentimes suicidal or homicidal. I mean, it's serious. So
Right.
this system in our country is incredibly broken, and it has failed us on so many levels. So I'm just trying to do some initiatives that I think will help those like my brother and sister that struggled.
Sure. One thing I do want to mention, since we're on this conversation, I don't know how much you've heard of, looked into what's sort of happening. Some are calling it a psychedelics renaissance, but there's actually a huge amount of research and evidence, various studies going through Johns Hopkins and really reputable institutions where they're finding tremendous benefit from
And psychedelics.
Yeah, and I should say responsibly, clinically administered psychedelics. I'm not actually advocating for the free, unregulated usage of the very, very powerful compounds. But what we're finding is that in certain situations, the profound healing benefits are, well, exactly just that, and they're showing huge promise. So just planning that there. I'm actually on the Nevada Coalition for Psychedelic Medicines.
Are you?
And I can't take much credit for this, but our board got a SB 242 passed. Had Governor Lombardo signed this, and it's a study group for psychedelic medicines, and it's quite an excellent board. We have everybody on this board from. And
you guys all thought he was a conservative.
Well, that's. I am just throwing it out there that. Well, I mean, I didn't even vote for him, but what I will say is
maybe
that
you have to now.
I will. All I'll say is that props to him, probably, because anybody who hears about that, it's not necessarily probably exactly in line with his political mission, but I think that it's really impressive. And one of the ways that we've been able to reach people like Governor Lombardo is through showing them the data about first responders that have had profound benefits, people that are suicidal and treatment resistant to this stuff. And so it's psychedelics, believe it or not, have sort of become an unpartisan issue because it's helping. They don't care how far left you are or how far right you are. They can actually develop.
Well, and I think too, think about it. There's so much we don't know that when we study it, I think we would be very surprised. When we open our minds, we'd be very surprised. I will tell you this. And so I've had experience on both sides with a friend of mine that he suffers with major depression and told me that psychedelics changed his life completely. And who he is now, night and day, and he credits psychedelics. And I also have a friend, a very good friend, who was very, very against any kind of drug. I mean, even so much as a Tylenol. And he was diagnosed with cancer. And he was in a study, and I think it was Johns Hopkins, and he is now cancer-free. I mean, this is the last person that I would ever think in a million years that would
be open to even,
Exactly.
One of our board members is like that. I won't mention him by name.
Maybe it's the same. Maybe it's my friend. But and I never would have believed it. Like I said, he wouldn't even take a Tylenol.
Yeah.
So, and listen, I mean, I think, when you're facing something like life and death, and depression can be life and death. Yeah. Right? I just think you would probably try to do anything to save your life
at that point.
Yeah. So I don't like to judge, because I also think some people, like acupuncture works for some people, doesn't work for me, but it does work for some. So all of us are different in the way we're going to respond to something, and I do think you have to keep your mind open, because I think there's a lot of things we haven't studied that could all be very well big possibilities in medicine.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I want to lead into that by just saying that when you look at politics, so many people think that politics in this country, politics around the world, whatever, are broken. Now, one could argue that politics have always been a complicated arena, right? I mean, there's always been perverse incentives, but here's where I'm going with U.S. Conference of Mayors. it's easier to believe in the power of a mayor, for example, or a city council member. You know, to an extent, even a governor on a somewhat reduced local-ish level. For example, we have a problem in Reno. People know how to get a hold of you or somebody close to you or make a stink of something, however justified it might be or not. When you're talking about something at the national level, we feel so removed that we don't even have anything to do with it. And so how did you get into U.S. Conference of Mayors, and how are you thinking about government from, I guess, your position as having really a lot of power to affect change that people can actually feel, you know, compared to a national situation where maybe there's less you can do, you know?
Well, but you know what's so funny is that I think more people are dialed into national politics. Where
they are, but
think about it, where actually they should be dialed into their local politics, because it can affect you. Like you have
so much more.
Like I always use this analogy. What if, let's just say, you know, we could make your commute miserable. We put in a street light, and now all of a sudden you're going to be 15 minutes late to work, right? Those kinds of things. Or, you know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden, you know, your favorite park is being removed, right? Like those kinds of things. Like we have a direct impact on your life. So I'm always sort of surprised how, like, people 9 times out of 10 when they want to talk politics, it's always national.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute. We got to talk about local. But most people are really dialed in at the national level, where it's not something that they feel every single day, but you will feel it when your elected leaders are right here at home.
Yeah.
But I also think, too, there's a difference in being a local politician because you live in this community, right? Like
if it sucks, that sucks for you too.
Right.
You don't want,
well,
as your incentive, you don't want it to suck.
Is exactly it. Like, I mean, I know that, you know, people like in the past are like, oh, I don't like that president. Or and I'm always like, I'm that type of person of like, listen, I want to wish our president well, because we're all on, you know, all in the ship together, right? So I want good things, you know, for us, our country. Like we're all in this together, and I think people forget about that. And what was interesting is that I met with he was the head of security. Oh, and I'm trying to think when it was. I don't remember when it was, but he said to me, you know, Hillary, he goes, it's so funny because everyone thinks that all these other countries are our biggest threat. He goes, really? We are our own biggest threat, because we're trying to take down each other when we should be, you know, yes, we might have disagreement. We might not agree on everything, but we also should be making this country the strongest it can possibly be together instead of fighting one another. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, politics is super complex, and I'm not a big policy wonk. Yeah. I'm really a person that just, you know, loves my city, loves my community, and just wanted to see a difference in what it was before. And listen, that's not a bad thing in the sense of like, you know, maybe the administration before, that was great for then. We evolve and things change. Right. So I just wanted to see something different, as I would hope the next future generation of local leaders will want something different than what I wanted.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are you anything notable to discuss about what's happening with U.S. Conference of Mayors right now?
Yeah, well, I have been doing a lot of work with them, which has been really great. Like I said, I've been working with the Surgeon General on initiatives. We're getting ready to do a big playbook, Mayors for Mental Health and Cities for Mental Health, and all, you know, and trying to put together an index where we can rate sort of a city's mental health and have certain things that you can do in your city that you have to meet the criteria so your score goes up. So we have benchmarks, so we finally have a place to start. Yeah. And so just working with mayors across the country, it's been a very big honor to do that, to be on the Hill and meeting with our representatives. I met with, just a few months back, I met with Pelosi and McCarthy, both sides of the aisle, right? Because they understand mental health is not a partisan issue.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
So doing a lot of that work is really important. But again, like, I think it's also important for me to show mayors, like, if you're not talking about it in your community, who is?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where I think, and it's kind of interesting because it's taken me 10 years to actually, like, it's a long sort of process to get to be the president. And I kind of actually just fell into it, which was really strange because I was happy being on the executive board.
Tell me more about that. How did you fall into that?
Well,
was it sort of like how you became mayor and all of your friends were like,
voted, right?
Hillary?
Honestly, I think part of it had to do with being a nonpartisan, and I work with both sides. Yeah. But mayors typically do. We always say there's no Democrat or Republican way to clean a street. We always say that, right?
That's what I'm saying. That's so powerful. Why people should pay attention to local politics more, right?
Right.
Because you don't have time for that crap. It's
and
like, does it work or not?
operate very differently. Like, we really work with both sides of the aisle. I was just telling one of my favorite mayors from Fresno, Mayor Dyer, I was just telling him, I said, God, we should do, like, how they have like wife swap? Let's do, like, congressional swap, right? Like, let's have mayors go in for their jobs for at least 6 months and see what we could get done.
I would be all about it.
Right?
And be all about it.
And so, I just think people are frustrated with that. But I work really well with my colleagues, and I do think probably being a nonpartisan helped. But you have to be voted by. Right. It's a vote that they take, and so
from the other mayors. Okay.
Right. So it's been a real honor because typically it goes to big cities. Yeah. It goes to big city mayors.
Sure.
That's and I'm
cool.
a biggest little city mayor.
The biggest little president of the U.S. Mayor's Conference. I love it.
But no, it's hard for me. I will tell you this. The one thing it's been a lot because you have to travel a lot this year because you're doing a lot of advocacy work. And, you're representing
I see your
mayors.
Posts all over the place.
Yeah, so, but I would say this, it's hard because I hate to travel. People don't know this about me, but I force myself to get on a plane. I'm a serious...
Do you have a phobia of flights? Or?
Yes, I'm a white knuckle flyer.
Okay.
I hate it more than anything in the world.
And flying out of Reno is even worse. Flying into Reno, right?
It's the worst. But I haven't traveled much other than to the conference. That's all I've sort of focused on because I wanted to really hone in on being effective.
Yeah.
And so that's good, but like I said, I mean, I literally get on a plane and just, want to curl up in a ball with massive anxiety and sweaty palms. And so that's what's the hard part. But I'm forcing myself to do it. So I'm doing a better job at getting a little bit over my fear of flying.
Well, I would suppose you'd have to.
Right. Because I think, there was just also something out there just recently about the conference, and it was a little negative, and it was just there
was a public response was negative, you mean, or
there was
okay.
There was a sort of a local article that was negative about it, and like basically saying, oh, the city is paying for the mayor to go to this conference, and I just don't know if they understand how hard you have to work, like from sun up to sundown, especially if you go to DC, because then the 3-hour time difference just kills you because you start meetings at 7:30 in the morning. Yeah. Well, do the math. Yeah. It's so hard.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
He's like, he's all, yes, 3:30.
Well, I just had a real quick week-long trip to Florida, and I dealt with the same thing. I was on a 6 a.m. flight out of Miami. So I actually got up at 11 p.m. Reno time. And then I had a full day when I got back. It was like, oh my gosh, that was stupid.
I can't even do math. 4:30, right? So think about it. 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
You're miserable. Yeah. You're miserable. But then the weird thing is, then you're trying to be, a gracious host at night, right? And then you realize, hey, I'm not tired. And they're like, but it's 3:00 in the morning. Well, it's only 12 o'clock where I'm from.
Exactly.
So you're like on both sides. Or it's really hard. But my point is that you're not there like hanging out by the pool or having fun. And little do they know how much like I had to talk myself into getting on the flight. Right. So it's just kind of interesting that, something that I think has been a real positive for Reno. We've had access to a lot of grants like NEA grants, things like that. And so, I'm proud of the work that we've done. And not to mention, I think the perception on a national level before mayors were like, oh, Reno, they'd never really known a lot about Reno, just what they heard from sort of the perception that we've had.
Which isn't usually what we want them to be hearing. Usually it's the gaming, that's it. It's Reno 911 and casinos.
Right, and that's exactly what they would all say.
And they all think it's near Vegas. I have friends from the Midwest. They're like, hey, I'm coming into Vegas this weekend. Do you want to meet up? I'm like, it's 8 hours away.
Like it's a 15-minute drive. That's exactly right. The perception is just so different. Yeah. And so I think we've changed a lot of that perception. And so I'm actually really proud of it. And matter of fact, I got to host mayors here 2 years ago. We had the Vice President of the United States come in and sit down with us. Yes, you came. Yes, you came. Yeah. And so, and it was a $3 million economic impact.
For sure,
on our local economy.
Oh, it was awesome.
So I'm just, so I guess I just get a little, when that kind of thing.
That frustrates you.
Yeah, it's frustrating me because I think people don't realize how much work it is.
The person who's going to express that concern is probably not somebody that you're going to be able to please anyway, right?
No, that's exactly right. They're going to say it.
Your information diet reduction,
and then they also,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're only going to tell you their side of the story.
Right.
They're, like you said, there's always the other side. But no, I guess I just take it personal because I love Reno so much that I'm very protective of my city.
Yeah.
I mean, many of you guys that follow me on Twitter, whenever the comedian that went after us, Jim Jeffries, and he was saying negative things about Reno. So now it's funny, like people will tag me in Twitter posts when someone's saying something negative about Reno because they know it makes me so upset. Yeah, they're like, Mayor Schieve, you got to go after this person, right? Yeah. And so as much as I want to, I've learned to kind of dial back a little bit, but I do get very upset when people are negative towards Reno.
Yeah. Did you, speaking of U.S. Conference of Mayors, this is just a personal question. Did you get to work with Mayor Pete Buttigieg?
Yes.
You did a little bit? Okay.
Yes, and I just saw Mayor Pete at the White House, and he was one of my favorite people. And we were singing him happy birthday. Too bad you weren't with us because you could have done a much better job than we did. And
tell him I campaigned for him in 2020,
right
before COVID happened.
That.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, and I'm hoping that he'll run again. For something really fantastic and maybe president someday. I think he's incredibly talented. Oh, there you go. No, God, no. I know when I'm done, I'm done. Okay. No, but I want to root those guys on, and he's wonderful, and he's very, very talented. He's he was a wonderful mayor. He was a wonderful mayor. So, and he's doing a great job in transportation. We just, matter of fact, I was just with his representative 2 days ago, and they said, congratulations, you're getting a $7 million grant for infrastructure. Cool. From our office. So, nice. So yeah, I mean, I think that's super exciting, but I'm a big fan of his as well.
Can I tell you how I became a fan of his?
Tell me.
It was as simple as one of my dear friends sending me a video of Mayor Pete, probably in 2019. And this is coming from somebody who's basically checked out of politics, for better or worse. So I thought it was even more powerful to get it from this person. Yeah. And I said, have you heard of this guy? And it was an interview clip where some journalist was asking him, basically, what is your plan moving forward with the homelessness problem? And he said something to the effect of, we've tried this, it hasn't worked. I'm really not sure exactly what's next, but we're working with some smart people on this topic. We're exploring every avenue, and we're going to figure it out. But you know what caught me there? Instead of saying, it's his fault, he said, we're doing the best we can. It's very complicated. We don't actually know, but we're going to figure it out. And that was honesty in a political world where everybody is a liar. Not everybody, of course, but most are.
Right.
And in a culture where we value asserting that you're correct and blaming instead of basically just being honest and saying, hey, this is complicated and I don't know. And as soon as I saw him answer that way, I was like, I almost don't care anything else about you, but the fact that you answered it that way, it means I want to support you.
Yeah. Right? So you felt like you trusted him. And I think that's great. And I do think that you should always say, if you don't know, you don't know. And I'll find out the answer, but I don't know. And that, I think, to your point, I think it also probably felt very authentic and genuine, and there isn't enough of that in politics. And I tell people that I'm around, sometimes they'll be like, oh my God, this or that I these are other politicians. I'm like, listen, honesty is the best policy. Just be really honest but also be honest about what you don't know.
For sure.
Right? And that's where I think people can make a difference in how we choose our political leaders. Like you said,
so.
you just liked his honesty, because I don't want someone to tell me, the things that we think that we want to hear.
No, tell me the truth. I think we can handle
it. Well, that's the thing. Even
if
if you don't like it, wouldn't you much rather know
what's going on? Yeah.
So I think, you're right. He is just wonderful. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have time for two quick ones? So one is about your figure skating. I think I knew this, but Brian told me that you were quite an accomplished figure skater. Which I want to ask you about.
That's like in my last life and like decades and decades and decades ago. And I'm sure, I got the skates out again in my last political campaign.
I saw a video of you doing something impressive.
I think the line was, there's a lot of spin going around, and then it had me doing a spin. It was really nice to get back out onto the ice, and I miss it. But you and I share something in common. We're both very competitive, because you were a competitive skier.
Right, yeah. As I told you, that's how I ended up in Reno, was to ski and I got to get you to skee ball next year.
Yes, I would love that. But I don't know if a lot of people know that about you, because I just always thought it was music that maybe brought you here.
It was always happening, but it was skiing. But back to you. I want to hear about this. I want to hear about your
my back in the day.
Yeah.
No, I used to train in at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, and I was trained by. Well, see, your listener is going to be much younger, so they're not going to know who Dorothy Hamill is. Mm-hmm. Her coach, he was one of the most well-known Olympic coaches in the country, actually in the world, because he was from Italy. His name was Carlo Fassi, and I actually went to Santa Rosa whenever I was about 9 years old for an ice skating camp, because we had just gotten an ice rink here at Meadowood Ice Arena.
Okay.
Can you believe, at the mall? People don't even remember that.
I certainly don't.
An ice rink. Yeah, you wouldn't, because you were a baby. But anyway, and so I learned to skate there, and I was just it was just natural. I was just pretty good at it, probably like you were with skiing.
Yeah. Felt natural. Yeah,
right. It just felt so normal and natural. And so my mom signed me up for a weekend to go skate in Santa Rosa at a skating camp, and he happened to be there and said, "Wow, I think your daughter's really talented." And of course my mom was like, "Yeah, okay, sure."
You were how old?
Yeah, I was 9.
Okay, all right.
And he said, "I'd love to train your daughter." And I mean,
That's
that
great.
was like huge. And it was probably actually really good for me growing up, saved my mental health, right? And I just, I'm a big believer in sports, and just kind of, I guess, there's a lot that goes on, with sports. There's mental toughness.
Yeah.
There's physical toughness.
Yeah, adversity. You learn about yourself. You learn to fail gracefully.
And it's so true. You do. You learn to fail, and you also learn to fall and get back up.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And it actually, when we're talking about sports, there's also, I know you've been a big proponent of arts, and myself being a musician, you being an artistic person, we both share this common affinity for both of these sides of life, right? But as a child growing up, whether it's one or the other, a combination of both, it gives you an outlet to sort of figure out who the heck you are, right? It's
so true.
It's whether it's arts or sports, these are activities that are so helpful for the youth. And
I think so much of it too is for your brain.
Totally.
Your mind.
Yeah.
It puts you in a whole different mind frame. Because think about it, if you're not a competitor, or into sports competitively or in some way, practicing your craft, whatever that looks like, but it puts you in a different mind frame. Think about that if you didn't experience that. So I think it definitely does something to your brain where it just makes you think a little bit differently.
Yeah. Well, final question. Thank you so much
for
your time. Final question for now. Thank you so much, by the way, for your time.
Of course.
And obviously, so we certainly don't need to go into it in any serious depth, but here we are coming up on an election in November, a presidential election.
We are.
What do you make of that? I'm not asking you to. I'm not asking you to say on who you're going to vote for or anything like that.
What do you make of that?
I'm just. We can see a lot of tension, and frankly, I'll just start by saying I'm quite nervous about it. And as a mayor,
I think a lot of people are nervous
Yeah.
about it. I hear it all the time on both sides. And I also have a lot of friends that are D's and R's, and they're saying, I don't want to be a party anymore. I want to be, an independent. I'm hearing a lot about that. But people are feeling very, very anxious, incredibly anxious.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of unknown. And then I also think, you have one candidate there that, quite honestly, is... I don't know what the word is for it, but can just have this tone of, conspiracy and things that aren't healthy at all. And I just think that does not help. That rhetoric just does not help.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of people are nervous about it, not just mayors across the country, but I mean, I've heard it, when I was with all my mayor colleagues a couple weeks ago. Everyone is very nervous. And like you're saying, I think it's causing a lot of anxiety on both sides.
I'm just fidgeting even a little bit.
Yeah, I can tell.
Just talking about it.
Eric's sitting here seriously, I can tell you're uncomfortable, and a lot of people are uncomfortable. And I just think that, this country is feeling very uneasy about elections and what's going to happen. And, it's just, it's so unfortunate.
Well, and we really had, you could either call it a constitutional crisis or almost a constitutional crisis last time. And that was with 4 years less AI, deep fake potential, all kinds of crap. And regardless of who wins, I certainly know who I hope wins, although I'm actually hoping that somebody else will emerge because, frankly, I can't believe that America in 2024, that the best two candidates we could come up with are these two guys, frankly. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way, though.
Where we are.
I do think a lot of people feel that way. That I think people want to have hope and feel inspired, and they're not feeling that way.
Right.
They're feeling uneasy and doubtful, and especially in trying times, what we're seeing all across the world, right? So I think a lot of people feel the way you do. So, it's an unfortunate time.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll leave it
What
there.
about you? Let's turn the tables on you,
all right.
because you've sat here for an hour and we got to talk about me. But what about you? Just give us an update on your music, because you're probably not I don't know. Are you being good about sharing that information on social and stuff?
Totally.
You are? Okay.
I could always be better. I mean, but I've been working as diligently as I ever have. I've got
and I
two
love the
singles
new
coming
look
out.
here, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know.
Thank you.
It's very
There's no
Harry
video
Styles.
component here, but
yeah, there's no video component, but let me give everyone just a little idea. So your hair is so great because it's longer and curly. It's very Harry Styles.
Thank you.
And you're wearing a very cool burgundy velvet blazer, which is always badass. It doesn't matter, it's like a classic.
You can compare me to Harry Styles anytime you want. Let me just
it is. It's very. I mean, it is. It's very different than the Eric that we're used to.
Yeah, no beard.
I like it.
Every now and again, you need to have a little
love
bit of
it
a
actually.
change. So, well, thank you.
It's great. And so, just tell us.
Yeah.
I want to hear. So, tell us about your latest project.
Yeah, I've got a couple songs that are already done that are coming out in the spring. One, actually, you asked me about the cruise that I did with Train last year. One is actually a co-write and a co-production with Matt Musty, who's the drummer from Train, which was a friendship
big
and
deal.
professional relationship
How cool
that came
is
out, which
that?
is amazing. Matt's just such a cool dude. As a matter of fact, one of the previous episodes was with him a couple months ago. You can find that Conversations for Convergence.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna.
Cool.
I'm definitely gonna download it.
Cool.
Love it.
Another song coming out, a live album coming out. I just launched a Patreon for anybody who's interested. You can find that. It's linked to my episodes here because part of what I'm doing with the Patreon is music as well as the podcast, which I've started.
That.
So
I love that.
I've never been busier. Yeah, life is good.
And I also saw, I watch a lot of, like, whenever I do get on social, sometimes, rarely, but you
Good.
and Whitney, right? You and Whitney collaborating all the time.
We've been doing a ton of stuff together.
And
yeah.
she's so talented
Yes.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed. Every
I
time
just
singing
love
with her,
watching
it's
that.
always like, holy cow, is this real?
Yeah.
She's
And
a fan.
like, you're so lucky. I mean, think about it. Like, if you ask people, like, in your next life, what do you want to do when you come back? Like, wouldn't everyone say, I want to be able to have this incredible singing voice? Wouldn't they?
Well, a lot of people say that, yeah, and it's not lost on me. It's a wonderful gift to be able to sing. Yeah, I mean, because it really is. It's this ability to write songs too. It's a unique chance to express how you feel, not only in the writing but also in the verbal, like, communication of an emotion. And
Yeah.
you know, a lot of times, speaking of mental health, all I need to sort of fix a bad day or crappy conversation or just a low mood is sitting at the piano and singing some songs. There's something so almost primal about it, honestly.
Oh, for
you
sure.
know?
For
So-
sure. And we're all jealous that we don't have that talent.
Well, thank you. Thank you for
No,
saying that.
we really are. When did you know that you could sing?
You know, I was singing in elementary school choirs and middle school choirs, and I always really liked it. But I think I was well into high school by the time people always said, oh, you have a nice voice, or I kind of knew I could sing relatively well. I was actually playing the viola was my first instrument.
Wow.
And so singing was sort of a secondary thing. And then probably around 17, 18, it was like, oh, wow, I feel so uniquely embodied when I'm doing this in a way that nothing else
Yeah, but
kind
you
of
also
allows
play
me to
the
do.
piano.
Right.
So how old were you when you learned the piano?
So actually learning the piano was something that came from playing the viola and orchestra, because we would go into the orchestra room and we would tune our violas by pressing the A key, hold down the A key. And so there was always a piano somewhere. And then I ended up just sort of stumbling upon the piano and messing around with it. I actually really didn't have any formal piano lessons. I had a handful maybe by the time I was in college, but I did on the viola. That was like a
But
pretty
that's
strict
way
academic
different than the
It is,
piano.
yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah, I almost say that sometimes I'm uncomfortable even saying it on the piano, because the piano as an instrumentalist has become my home. But yeah, I'm really self-taught there. It just was
That's
a function
crazy.
of logging hours and hours and hours, and at the detriment of high school math class. And you know,
Like, do you
I remember
read
being in the
notes, or you do that by feel? You can read,
I can read. I don't read piano music very well, because again, I learned to read piano music when I was learning orchestration and learning the viola, but it was never in the context of piano lessons.
So when did you start playing piano?
12, 13, 14, and I say that because it just started as a very casual thing. Like, I'd start with the A key and then I would throw in a few other notes. By the time I was 14, it was definitely like, okay, I'm a piano player.
Wow.
But it just sort of happened, you know?
That's amazing.
Just sort of,
'cause
just
I
like
think
how
it's
you
a
came into
talent.
politics. It
Right,
just
right.
happened.
It just happens, right?
Right.
But I think it's a huge talent, though. Like, it must be. So do you think that anyone can learn to play?
I think anyone can learn to play or sing to a level that will bring them satisfaction and happiness, and they'll be able to experience some of what I've explained about it just being this wonderful, like, somatic, like, primal experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, like anything else, there are varying levels of talent that might be required to, like, do it at a professional level.
Mm-hmm.
But I always say, sometimes people will come up to me in their 50s and 60s and 70s and say, I always wish I would have learned an instrument. I say, it's not too late.
I know.
And I really believe that. It's not too late.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because that gives all of us hope that who we
Do you
think
play an
are-
instrument?
No, I don't. I
Well,
don't.
we'll do it the same day as the ski lesson.
Okay, we're gonna play instruments and ski.
Not at the same time.
On
That
the
might be
same
too
day.
complicated.
But one thing you cannot refute, and I will tell you, which is like the best for my mental health, and I think to your point, you alluded to this, but anyone can do this. I think music just changes your entire mood, brain, everything about you the minute that you hear it. Like, it can just totally get you out of funk. One thing a lot of people don't know about me, I like music of all different kinds, but one thing is I also like heavy metal music.
Really?
Yeah, and so sometimes
You
when
heard
I'm
it
driving,
first on Conversations for
right.
Convergence. Mayor
But,
Hillary
like,
Schieve loves heavy metal music.
But I also like my music very loud.
Okay.
Very, very loud. But my point is that the music is just so powerful. It's just so powerful. So, I think if we did more like music therapy and things like that,
No kidding.
The world would be
Yeah.
a much better place.
Yeah.
So with that being said,
Okay.
thank you so much for having me, Eric. You know I'm a big fan, and you also put a huge bright light on this city with your music, especially during a very, very difficult time. And so promote it while you can. If anyone needs to get some a dose of, I think it is like one of the best. I mean, I don't know, but like I think it is one of the best songs I have ever heard.
Yeah.
And when I watch it, I have so much inspiration, and it makes me so proud. But why don't you plug it for us? The City Song Project.
So during COVID, Mayor Schieve enlisted me to produce this citywide project, which was a song and a music video during the pandemic. And the idea was essentially to spread some message of hope and community. It's actually just where we started with this podcast. The whole project there was to foster a sense of community and hope in a rather unfortunate time, right?
Yeah.
Where we weren't really feeling very good about much of anything, in fact. So, and I remember when I decided to take on that project, pretty much as soon as I committed to it, I immediately panicked, and I was like, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? But it was also one of the most amazing projects I've ever participated in. So thank you for trusting me to
Eric, I got to tell
it.
you, it will by far always be one of my most favorite songs. And one of, like I said, you put a bright light in our city when it was a definite time of darkness.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much. It's called Heartbeat to Heartbeat, Eye to Eye from Reno with Love, by the way. You can find it on YouTube and Spotify and anywhere you listen to music. But
again, Heartbeat to Heartbeat, Eye to Eye.
From Reno with Love.
From Reno with Love.
Longest title ever.
I know.
Yeah, From Reno with Love.
I know. I always say From Reno with Love.
Nice. We'll go with that.
All right.
Well, Mayor Schieve, thank you so much for being so gracious with your time.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. And
that's a wrap.
Until next time.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conversations for Convergence. If you'd like to support the show or any of my musical endeavors, the best way is by joining my Patreon at patreon.com/Eric Henry Anderson. Of course, sharing the episodes with friends and family and rating and reviewing the show wherever you listen to podcasts helps immensely. For all other things Eric Henry Anderson, be sure to sign up for my mailing list at erichenryanderson.com. That's Anderson ending in S-E-N. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Eric Henry Anderson, and on X at capital E, capital H, capital A, Andersen Music. Thanks for listening.